and thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. We're at the ever-popular No Soundbites Allowed podcast, and I am happy to be here with you. And I hope everyone else is well also. I know it's been a little while since we did this live podcast on Facebook, the Simulcast, and I wanted to take a time to get back to it. Never good to take too much time away from doing these. And I see TJ Keegan's already joined us, and it's good to see you there, TJ. Now, it's been a lot of busy weeks. I've been doing a lot of things. And so let me first catch up everybody a little bit why I missed the last week or so. There's been a lot of going on in several campaigns that I work with, and I help out where I can and volunteer because I'm involved in politics. I also been talking to a lot of politicians. There was the Speedy Fest last week. Everyone was out at that, and I think we had a great time with it. And it was a good experience for everyone. And I got to speak to many of the politicians in the Southern Tier region over the last week or so. And so that's why I was away and I wasn't able to do the podcast. And if you're looking at me right now and you're saying, gee, Mike, you look a little bit tired. Yes, I am. I'm actually very tired. And I just woke up not too long ago, actually. And I see that we've got Doug Gibson here with us and Tamishi Sher. So it's great to see everybody there. I see Patty Stanko is here with us as well. And so we have a lot of things to talk about. And Phil Cahill is here. Oh, wow, I'm popular today. It's good. It's the rain that's outside. And I do apologize. I was actually going to be helping out a couple of friends today at 10:30, but the rain threw me off, and I wanted to be here with everybody as well. Now, there's a lot of things to talk about. I'm probably thinking that one of the most popular things people would want to talk about is President Trump coming out to Utica. And I'll be happy to talk about that. I think it's a very exciting issue. And it'd be really, it could really have some interesting conversation. I think you may have a lot of questions about that. And I'll try and answer as best I can on any of that. I do want to make people aware, on August 20th, I will be making a presentation on the red flag bills across the nation, and in particular in New York State. From what I can tell in the research, the presentation I'm going to be making is probably going to be one of the most comprehensive discussions on the idea of red flag bills in the nation. And it may be, I don't think there's anything else quite like that anywhere else in the nation. So I'm looking forward to it, and it's going to be at the Vestal Public Library. That'll be on August 20th, starting at 7 o'clock. I do invite everyone to come. The media is invited, and I hope everybody shows up for this. It's quite interesting and very impressive to know what's going on with this legislation, how it's going to affect individuals and their families in ways that both the legislation is talking about and also the consequences of that legislation. A lot of people are not aware of that, not prepared for that, and I think they'll be shocked by what's really going on. Even some of the politicians don't understand the consequences of what this bill means. But we'll talk about that then. I also want to mention that I'm looking forward to talking to the New York State Women Incorporated. That's going to be on the next week Friday. I'll have Heather L. Micah, who will be speaking with us from that organization. I'll be doing an interview with her, so I'm looking forward to that. And I do invite everyone to look out for that and to hear about the New York State Women Incorporated. Now, with that being said, we can go right into Trump, or let me ask, I see Anne-Marie Diorio has also joined us as well. Let me ask, is there any question you guys have? Before I start off, I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on in politics. There's a lot of issues out there. So let me ask, is there something that anyone wanted to talk about, any question you guys had, whether it's local or national, that I can go over with you and let you know about, or have some more detail talked about? I know there's lots of things that I go over all the time. So is there anything, one of the things that caught my attention, and I do want to get to this before I get to talking about President Trump. Did you hear about what's happened with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ben Shapiro? I thought it was phenomenal. It's been interesting, to say the very least, just to watch her flounder as she's trying to answer things. And if you're not familiar with that, what happened is Ben Shapiro, who has the Ben Shapiro Show, he's also the owner of the Daily Wire. He had made an offer to Miss Ocasio-Cortez, who is the upstart. If you're not familiar with her, she's the upstart in the New York 14th Congressional District. She's a socialist, and she's running for Congress, and she knows just about nothing about politics. Literally, I've run into people down the street, and they've known more about politics than she does. And I see Anne-Marie has a question. I'm going to get right to that in 1 second, Anne-Marie. I just want to finish this thought that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez has been taped. Because she's a socialist, because she's young, because she's a woman of color, she's been very popular going around the entire nation, and she has no idea about economics, international policy, U.S. policy. I don't even know how she's running or how she's won to be able to be running for Congress. And Ben Shapiro asked her to do an interview with him, and she said no. But the way she said no and what's happened because of that has been incredible. And so that's one of the things I want to talk about. But I do have a question from Anne-Marie, and that, of course, takes precedence over anything that I wanted to talk about. So let me get to that question. Actually, she has two now. So I do want to answer those for you, Anne-Marie. Give me a second here. I can see them a little better this way. So Anne-Marie asked, why is the city of Binghamton giving away free water and sewer to some employees, family, friends, and people who have a lot of money, but yet my sewer bill in the town of Binghamton for one person is $1,200 a year just for sewer? Okay, and the second question is, and why is it that the majority of big buildings in downtown Binghamton are paying no taxes, no property taxes at all, which is hurting our schools? And then I found properties that are assessed for $200,000 that were purchased for $4.6 million. Okay, so Emery, and I see Heather. Hello, Heather. Let me go over this pretty much in order. I'm not aware of the city of Binghamton giving away free water and sewer to employees, family, or friends. And I would need to see documentation about that because I'm not aware of anything of that nature. Whether in the case of an employee, if this is happening, it could be possible because the employee has a contract that would say that, say for an executive, one of the top executives in there could be part of their package. But I'm not aware of anyone, employees, family, or friends. And your sewer bill sounds incredibly high. $1,200 a year? That doesn't sound normal. It's way higher than mine. And so it sounds, something seems to be off in the numbers. It doesn't make sense to me. So I can't address that because I don't have any proof or documentation on that. I can't speak to it. But it doesn't sound right. In terms of your other question about the majority of big buildings in downtown are paying no taxes, that's not accurate. The majority of buildings, especially bigger buildings in the city of Binghamton, do pay taxes. So there are abandoned buildings, and we have quite a few of those abandoned buildings throughout the city of Binghamton that aren't paying property taxes. That's because they're abandoned. And that's something we need to turn around. That's that blight that we see. And there's a lot of blighted buildings, and that actually has a big problem. In fact, we have almost, 30-40% of our buildings have absolutely no occupancy. And so we're not, in many cases, no ownership. So we're seeing those properties are not getting taxes paid on. Specifically, a property that's purchased for $4.6 million that's assessed $200,000, I'd need to see that property. Is it part of a tax forgiveness plan for that business to go in and to redevelop an area or to create something that may have happened in the past and is still ongoing? That's possible. Those deals are made. So again, I need to see documentation. I can't speak to that. Anne Marie also has another question. And I'm not just talking about a few properties. I found over 200 properties that are getting free water and sewer and other perks, like parking lot paved or their place of business having city workers trim their shrubbery. And I have pictures. I will have all the proof, yet our state comptroller, Tom Napoli, and our lovely Governor Cuomo, and it's just a very odd question, and our lovely Governor Cuomo, and Cuomo is doing nothing about it except for covering up by giving them money, $20 million here, $20 million there, to cover up the extortion and the corruption that I have reported it to them. Met with them a total of 6 hours, and still nothing has been done except the mayor allowing people to put large items out on the curb for free. Anne Marie, I'm looking through this, and hang on. After I got out of the free garbage and dumpster service, when I say free, I mean free to those he's giving illegal gifts to. Anne Marie, as I said before, all the information I have is right on Broome County's website. Yes, I'd like to see the proof, because these are allegations. I've picked at Bob Joseph about this. I've picked at many people in politics and in radio and TV about this. It's unfounded. At this moment, the things you're saying are unfounded, and I can't respond to unfounded things. There's no proof of this. I know many people, both in the news services as well as in politics throughout the region. None of them have ever alleged this. No one has ever provided proof of this. No one can tell me this. You're making claims about people and organizations that I don't see it. I've never heard of it. I've never seen the evidence of that. And without having evidence or being able to see that, I can't speak to it. That's just an unfounded. I mean, I beat up on, not beat up. I addressed and brought up against former Mayor Matt Ryan, the fact that he was making unfounded allegations in much similar way as what this is looking like, where he had no proof of what he was talking about. He's on the radio, he's attacking people, and there's nothing there. So I don't know. And I see that Phil has an answer, and I know Phil is an individual who may have some ideas. The press building and 20 Holly Street have pilot programs and pay very little in property taxes. The city fought the press building pilot and will fight any new pilots. The county IDA is granting them against the city's wishes. And Phil's correct. And as I mentioned, there are tax deals that are out there for some buildings. And the majority of buildings that you could look at in the city of Binghamton that aren't paying taxes are abandoned buildings. They're blighted buildings. So to say that there's a large number of buildings in the city of Binghamton that aren't paying taxes, well, we've got 30% of the buildings in Binghamton are abandoned. To say that there are areas of Binghamton which are trying to be redeveloped, and that redevelopment may have a attachment of some kind of tax credit or other program from the IDA or other organizations, that's true. So just to say that any particular building or any particular location is not paying X dollars could be a lot of reasons for that. And that doesn't mean that there's corruption going on. It just means there's a reason for it. And people may not have researched it and found what that reason is. As Phil has pointed out, there's 2 buildings right there that have reasons behind it that not everyone may be remembering. So that's, I'm sure tax lookup. I'm not saying that you can't look it up and say, hey, that the taxes may be less, but that's not necessarily corrupt. That means that there may have been a tax deal that's done. It may be an abandoned building. So until there's more proof And I would suggest that rather than trying to do it in this format, if you believe you have proof of something else, of some other allegation, send it to me. Send it to me directly. And I'll look it over, and if there's something there, I'll be more than happy to follow it up. But I want, I'm not dodging your question, but I'm telling you I need far, far more proof and far more details than the allegation. And I thank Phil for filling in the detail there to bring a detailed example of what I'm speaking about in his comment. So I thank you for that, Phil. That was very helpful. And it shows the point out that I was making there. So besides the question about, and of course, there's still blight in the building, in the city. We've seen it reduce quite a bit, but it has improved. And we've seen a lot of businesses come in and they are redeveloping, and that's always been good. So beyond the question of blight, there are many other issues that people may have, and I definitely want to address it. And Marie, I'm not trying to blow you off. There's not much more I can answer about that without further research. So, I don't like to talk without knowing what I'm speaking about or having details on it. So I hope I answered it as best as I can for you. Now, going forward of that, I was talking about, and I'm always here for any of your questions. Please do ask. And it's always good for us we learn something new. That's why we have these conversations. It's not always because I have the answers. It's sometimes that we all have answers together. And that's how we learn. That's how we improve things. And that's how we get greater knowledge, because we have a conversation. And that's why I'm happy to do this. That's why I'm happy to be here with everybody. But I've been talking about Ocasio-Cortez and Ben Shapiro. And I do want to pick up that theme because I think it was kind of interesting to see what was going on there. But of course, if everyone wants to talk about something else, I'll be happy to go that direction as well. Looking at the Ocasio-Cortez and Ben Shapiro, as I mentioned, so Ben Shapiro had invited her. She's a candidate for the 14th District of New York. And even though she has an economics degree, she's a young woman just out of college, running for Congress. You would think she would know what she's talking about. There's been lots of documented cases of her just rambling when asked questions, like she supports the Bernie Sanders Medicare for All, a program that recently has been studied, not just once, but several times, and it's been determined that it would cost somewhere around $32 billion over 10 years. And all these studies put together, there's somewhere between 1.4 and $3.2 billion per year, 3.2 trillion dollars per year would be spent to provide this Medicare for All, which doesn't even talk or address the quality of healthcare that would be given to every individual in America. So it's a bit of a problem. But this program goes on out there, and it's amazing because there was a very simple question that was asked. Hello, Chris. Good to see you. And the question is, how do you pay for it? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was asked that, and essentially the answer she came back with was she has no idea. Basically, take the money from the rich, and that will cover it all. And it's actually ridiculous, because according to every estimate by everyone who has done an estimate on this, it would require that every tax in the nation, that's for individuals, for businesses, for corporations, every tax in the nation would have to double. And that still wouldn't pay for all of the Medicare for All. It would still be more expensive than that. We would have to add brand new taxes besides doubling every tax in the nation, and we still wouldn't be able to pay for it. And she couldn't answer that. She didn't realize that. And she thinks that, well, no, we'll just take it from the rich, or we'll just take it from businesses. That's crazy, because that doesn't work. It's never worked. And it's good to see John Becker and Chris Jones here with us. So that's the thing. And so Ben Shapiro wanted to ask her, and he did ask her to come onto his program. He would give her $10,000 to her campaign or to a charity for her to sit down and just have a conversation with him. It could be a debate or it could be just a conversation. And to have a conversation with him, talking about her values, the economic programs she supports, and why she believes in socialism. By the way, she believes in socialism. She's never lived in a socialist nation. I have lived in a socialist nation. I lived in a socialist nation for a year and a half. I lived in Moscow, which is part of Russia. And I lived there in 91, there for a year and a half. And I can tell you what it's like to be in a socialist nation. I understand. Matter of fact, ask anyone who's left a socialist nation why they don't like it. Anyone who's lived in a socialist nation understands it. Ask someone who just came from Venezuela how they think about socialist nations. And you'll see an answer right there. And I see Ron Stafford has joined us as well. Hey, Ron. So, yeah, you can ask any of these individuals what they think about socialism and socialist nations, and they'll tell you they're horrible. They don't work. But you know what? This is something that you're going to hear of Ms. Ocasio-Cortez and Cynthia Nixon and much of the left. They're saying this is the best idea ever. We suddenly have figured out how to do socialism better than anyone else has ever done socialism before, and socialism will work, except it's never worked. And the principles of socialism don't work, because the principles of socialism, hello Heath Phillips is with us as well, the principles of socialism require that you lose freedom. So that's kind of scary. That's terrifying, actually. To anyone, ooh, I don't know what that means. Phone's doing weird things. And I see Heath Phillips there. Hello, Heath. So, for some, anyone who's ever lived in a socialist nation understands you lose freedom. It's a requirement of socialism that you're going to lose freedom. You're going to lose opportunity because you must. That's the only way that it works. Socialism works by taking from others to give to someone else. So they're going to take your stuff and they're going to give it to someone else. And they keep doing that until it redistributes. But what that does is it destroys the economy, it destroys growth, it destroys opportunity or the desire for opportunity. It's kind of like the Jobs for All program that Ocasio-Cortez has mentioned she wants to support. And let's really think about what that is. You're talking about an idea. Imagine that you get into, and I see, John, you made a question. I'm going to answer that in 1 second. But imagine that you get a job and you're working for the government because you couldn't get a job for anyone else. You're either too lazy or incapable or you just don't care, and you get a job with the government. What happens? You can't get fired. The government is guaranteeing a job to everyone. Everyone is guaranteed a job. So if you have a job that's guaranteed by the government, you cannot get fired. What happens if you don't work? You get paid, right? But you have the job, but you can't get fired. Because if you get fired, then you have a job and the government provides a job for all. So then you get another job. You can't be without a job. So at that point, what's happening? Why work? I mean, literally, the question would be, why would I work? Because if the government must give me a job, therefore I cannot get fired. Therefore, why do I have to worry? I'll always have a job. I don't have to do a good job. I don't even have to care about my job. I don't even have to show up to my job. I will always have a job. That's what Jobs for All means. You have to have zero effort and you are guaranteed to get a positive return. That is the most stupid position ever. That makes no sense. No business works on that basis, ever. You're telling me that, well, people are just good-hearted, kind people, and they'll just work hard because, that's just what they wanted. No, that's not true. We see that every day. People don't work as hard as they can because they just want to. They do it because they have an incentive, something to motivate them to do that. But you're talking about Jobs for All, and this is what Ocasio-Cortez is supporting. Then, well, we should have the government provide, and so is Bernie Sanders. Government's going to guarantee a job for everyone. Fantastic. And no one has ever answered this question. I've asked it before of many, many people on the left and those who say they believe in socialism. And I ask them every time, okay, so if I have a guaranteed job and I have guaranteed health care, why would I work? What are you going to do? You've guaranteed me, the government has guaranteed me a job. They have guaranteed that I'm going to have an income, I'm going to live well. what happens if I don't do anything? I just take it. I'm just going to take it all. What happens then? And they don't have an answer to that because they never considered that there are people out there, many of them, who will go out and not do anything. They will not go to work. They will not try and contribute into this because they're getting things. They're just receiving stuff. And so they don't care. And then they'll just keep receiving it. And that's it. And there's no other input. They're not putting anything into the system. They're just taking it out. And imagine if there's millions and millions. It doesn't take long for people to notice. My neighbor never does anything. There is nothing that they're contributing to this society, but they have more stuff than I do. They have, they have living quarters, they have food, and they have TV and all that stuff. They're getting all this stuff, but they never work. I've asked them about it. They don't work. They don't care. Why am I going to work, working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, paying stupid taxes, not being able to get everything that I want, when my neighbor who's doing nothing is getting everything? I'm going to do what my neighbor does because the government will guarantee my job, and they're going to guarantee that I have a living wage, and they're going to guarantee that I have a place to live, and they're going to make sure that I have many necessities. The government's going to provide all of that. So why am I going to work for any of this? Let the government take care of it. And that's how you destroy a nation, because that's just a domino. And I've never heard a good answer from anyone who promotes this to explain how to stop that domino chain, other than, well, people won't do that because people are good. No, that's really not true, and that really doesn't work. But yet that's the only answer is, well, people will take care of it because people are great. Sorry, that's just not an answer. It really isn't. That's a dodge. But that is the answer that they provide. Now, I do want to get to, and I see Felicia's here and Dave Weston. I'm glad to see you guys. I do want to take a second here because I know there was a couple of questions, and I want to make sure I answer everyone's questions as best I can. And I see that, where is it here? Because you were just making it. Bear with me, I'm trying to find it here for you. John Becker had mentioned all these people supporting socialism need to look at history. It destroyed the old USSR, and Venezuela is all but collapsed. They need to just open their eyes. These people just want what others have worked for. And I wouldn't say that entirely of everyone. I mean, I want to be clear to them and to everyone. I don't necessarily believe that every single person who supports socialism just wants other people's stuff. I do believe that some people truly believe that this is a good system and that it will, as Ron Stafford says, redistribute someone else's money and stuff. That's what they think. And they think it's a positive because they've never actually seen it. They've never actually lived it. They have absolutely no idea how socialism works or how people feel or how oppressive it is to individuals. That's what they think. They think that, this is a positive. And I understand, as Ron says, as he commented, it's Bernie Sanders' running point. And people love Bernie Sanders. They think he's got a great idea with his free stuff, and this is all going to be great. I'm going to raise my minimum working wage. I'm going to go out there and I'm guaranteed a job, and I'm guaranteed health care. And you're right, John. Also, welfare is a part of socialism. That's actually part and parcel of what it does. So you're right. But I apologize if I have a slight cold there, folks. But here's the thing. When we're looking at socialism, which is just a lighter form of communism, they're on the same path. Essentially, you have, the more you guarantee someone, the more you have to take from someone. That is an absolute fact of the function of socialism. See, and I think I should take a moment to explain this, because I've had this conversation with people before, and I've noticed that they've always had the same question. It's kind of like with the red flag laws, as an example, where there are people who tell me, well, this is what the idea is. Here's what the law says. And then there's the function of the law. So laws may say, like the red flag laws say that, you could go to court and fight against someone saying that they're going to take all your firearms. But the function is that they will not talk to you beforehand. They will not notify you. They will go to the court, and without you being there, they will make a decision and come to your door and then notify you at your door with a warrant in hand and say, hey, here it is. Here's your warrant. We're taking all your guns. And you go, what? And they had, we got a warrant. We went to court. Oh, you weren't invited, but we did that. That's the function of the law. The function of it. The function of socialism. It sounds fantastic on paper. It sounds absolutely beautiful on paper. And maybe the first year or two that it's, first decade or so that it may be in a new country seems like a great idea. It seems to work fantastic. And then it becomes the function of it. Because it's one thing you can write anything, on a piece of paper, and it looks fantastic. It's the function of it. The Second Amendment sounds fantastic. It's the function of the Second Amendment that makes it the cornerstone of our government. That we are able to hold back our government because we have the right to defend ourselves from our government legally. That's a very big thing. We have the right to free speech. This is a function of the right to have free speech. Okay? That's something that you don't see in other nations. That right, that absolute right to be able to express your thoughts against government, against policy and politics, that's something that most nations don't have. And in fact, in many nations, like Venezuela and other socialist nations, like North Korea, and we can go through a whole list of them, it's very possible that if you speak out and say something against the government, against the politics of the nation, you will disappear, go into a gulag, be shot to death, thrown into a concentration camp. A lot of nasty, horrible things will happen to you if you speak out in many socialist nations, if you're speaking out against the government, because there is no freedom of speech. That is not a guarantee. Socialism doesn't. You ever notice? Socialists never say, come on, socialism is great because you're going to have even more freedom to speak. Never say that. They never mention that. It's not in their rhetoric. You're not going to be more free to speak. You're not even going to be as free to speak, because that's not what socialism is about. That's not its function. It's not about freedom. It's about redistribution. It's about taking from others to give to others. Taking from you to give to others. That is what socialism is. It's going to take your stuff, if you have more, and give it to someone else. That's not about freedom. That has nothing to do with freedom. By its definition, it's defeating freedom, because you can't have your stuff. Your stuff is you only have as much stuff as the state will allow you to have. Well, that has nothing to do with freedom. And neither would, and this is my understanding of it, and someone wants to tell me that I'm wrong, or if I'm misunderstanding the principles that I've lived through, I'd like to see that. But in particular, the function of it. And that's one of the most important things. And so that's why I have a problem with when people say, well, there's a guaranteed job for everyone. Well, what happens? You got to ask the question. You have to ask the question, because if it's like engineering or many other businesses, you have to make a flow chart. You have to figure out, okay, where are the faults? Will it work? Okay, when I put it together, if I put a building together and I didn't have any blueprints, is it going to stand? If I use goat cheese to build a building, is it going to stay up? I mean, I can do it. You could make a building out of goat cheese, but will it stand? Will it withstand the weather and the nature? Probably not. Same thing with the question about these principles of this democratic socialism, which is socialism, that's coming into America, that's trying to gain popularity, that has popularity with a lot of the youth of the nation. I think it's about 35% of millennials believe that socialism is a great idea. Fantastic. Well, here's a simple question. One of the principles of the socialism that's being offered right now is a job for everyone. And again, I've said it before, but some people maybe not heard it. Maybe they come into the program late. You got to ask the question, what happens if you don't work? It's a real simple circle, and it's a circle. I don't work. Government must give me a job. I don't work at that job. The government can't fire you. they must give you a job. And you must have a living wage for that job. That's another principle of theirs. So you're getting paid at this point better than most people, or many people, for a job you don't go to. And the government guarantees it. How long does that system continue to last? When does that fall on its face? It's incredible to me that people haven't asked that question. And I would love to see Bernie Sanders or anyone else answer that question. What happens if someone doesn't work? You're giving them health care, you're giving them food, you're giving them a living wage, you've guaranteed them a job, and they said that they're not going to work. But they're guaranteed the job. What happens next? What do you do? What, do you compel them to work? There's an interesting thing. Well, they have to go to work. Well, then now you're talking about compulsion. They're not doing it because they choose to do it. They're doing it because you told them to do it. Now, if you're wondering and listening to all this, and how I got to this is that because Ben Shapiro had invited Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to come onto his show and to have this very same conversation that I'm having with you to have with the nation, and to answer questions that I'm asking and I'm posing and I am answering, but to let her have that opportunity to give that answer, to explain and answer the question I'm asking right now, to be able to answer that with Ben Shapiro and to have a conversation, not him beating up on her or editing, but to just have that conversation. And he's willing to give her $10,000 to her campaign, to her campaign and or a charity that would be able to benefit from the money, just because he wants to have that conversation, because I quite honestly would love to hear her answer to this question. It's an important question in our politics today. And someone should ask it, and it should be answered by one of the supporters of that. Not me, because maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's some secret part of their program that they have not published and made public for anyone that answers this question, but I've not seen it, and I don't know of it, and I don't know anyone who's lived in a socialist nation that can answer this, nor do I know anyone who doesn't support socialism that can answer it, because I've also talked to people who do support socialism. They can't answer it. I have not heard a satisfactory answer to this question yet. But rather than answer that, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez instead said, well, no, Ben Shapiro, I'm not going to go on that program because he is catcalling me. Now, let's make sure that's clear. And if you didn't notice that in the news, check it out. Because the answer is, if a member of the press, a political commentator, asks Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to answer a question about her political beliefs, that's catcalling. You know what? That is someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. That's someone who's just running away from anyone who's trying to ask a question. It's someone who has no idea and is terrified someone's going to figure out that they don't know what they're talking about. That's my opinion about it. That's why I think she's dodging this. She's absolutely terrified that someone who isn't on the left or left-leaning, it's not a positive pro-news organization that's going to cover up or let her get away with it. It's actually someone who's going to call her out and say, well, that is one of the most stupid things I've ever heard. Because everything about Medicaid for all, jobs for all, living wage, it's all idiocy. When you stop and actually say, okay, wonderful words, what about the function? How does it function? We're talking about idiocy. It doesn't function. It doesn't work. But that's another thing. Now, John Becker mentioned to me, with the youth, they support it. I believe we're talking about socialism when he says that. I believe because liberal teachers are teaching it in schools, and that is where the parents need to step up and teach them differently at home and not rely on the schools so much. There's a lot to what you said there, John. And let me try and address a few parts of that, because I agree with you overall. But I do want to address a couple things there. Yes, part of the reason why we're seeing students in schools right now, why are they going so off the wall about socialism? Suddenly we've had a resurgence of socialism in the nation like we haven't seen since, maybe the 1940s. So it's been over 60 years, almost 70 years. because we have teachers who say, well, it's a great idea and it works well. Hi, Robin. It's good to see you. And we're having people and politicians who are doing, socialism light. That, well, I kind of support this very socialist idea, but I'm not a socialist. But you're right on that track. And they think these are great ideas because they say, well, it sounds nice. It's written really well, so it should be positive. Except no one thinks about, okay, and then what? How do you make these things function? What makes these things work? And where do they lead to? No one thinks about that. That's not our modern politics never asks about, okay, and then what happens? Our modern political outlook for any party never says, okay, and here's a direct consequence of what's going to happen here. So the direct consequence of jobs for everyone is that there is a growing portion of people who will not work because they are guaranteed the work. So they must always be paid. They are guaranteed a living wage. They are given health care. And every time if you say, well, we'll fire them, well, they're guaranteed a job. So they get a job again. So it's a circle. They can never not be working, even though they never will work. And they're guaranteed to be paid. That is a direct consequence of the idea. And that number is an ever escalating number of people who are going to do that because other people are going to see that you don't have to do anything and you're still going to get paid by the government under these principles. And therefore it just grows and grows and grows. That is a direct consequence of a direct logical consequence. I haven't even gone to the extremes. That's a direct logical consequence of what they're talking about. But we're not teaching kids to think with any kind of critical thought. We're not asking kids to have critical thinking to go, okay, beyond what I've just been told to memorize, what about that? What does this mean? What's the next step? We're not teaching that to kids anymore. We're teaching kids to memorize, remember A, remember B, remember D. Fantastic. By the way, you can make a word out of that. That's bad. Oh, I didn't know that. I just memorized A, B, and D. Well, yeah, you can do things with that. You can make words. Oh, well, that's fantastic. Too bad you didn't tell me that. You told me to memorize the letters, not make a word. That's a critical thought. We're not teaching that. We're teaching them, kids in schools today, to only be rote memorization. Because if you can only have rote memorization, it makes it very easy for an individual to go out there and not think. It makes it harder to think. You don't know how to critically think. You don't know how to make a good conclusion based on information that's happening around you in the world. And I think that's part of why we see this socialism going on. And I do believe that schools, and it's a fact, it's not even a question, schools have become far, far more liberal in their teaching, their philosophy, their employees, their documentation, the books they use, and the choices of books they ask students to read. That's factual. That's not even a question. Since about the 1960s, we've been seeing that, late 60s, 70s. And we've been seeing schools become more and more like that. And so that's been a trouble. And yeah, at the same time, we've had a lot less influence by parents on their kids, whether they're working 2 jobs or they're letting the TVs or video games raise the kids. These are some of the arguments that have been made. Or there's less time for one or both parents to be with the kids and to be involved in their lives, because the systems that kids are being taught today are so different. I mean, I remember, I have a sister of mine. She's about 14 years younger than I am. So I remember when I was going to high school and college, and I would come home and I would talk with my sister, my youngest sister, and she would mention to me if I could help her with her math. I looked at the math, and it had nothing to do with math. It's a logic problem, and a poorly designed logic problem, but this is what they were calling math. I'm like, well, that has nothing to do with it. I look at today, I'm looking at their system, and have you seen the new math system? Round it over to 10, take away 3, add 1, and there's what is that? That's not math. I don't even know what to call it. But this is the system that they're teaching kids to be able to think by, which is the most convoluted and stupid way to do it that I've ever heard of. I mean, the math system I grew up with got people to the moon. The new math system, kids can't figure out anything. I mean, there you go. That explains it right there. My math will get us, my math is the same as the math that the Greeks taught. And guess what? The Greeks figured out how far the sun is from the earth, and they were pretty close. I mean, the margin of error on their calculations, and they had nothing, and their calculations were off within the margin of error. Okay, you ask a kid to do that today, they don't even know how to even figure out what's the first part of that process, which is figuring out the angle. They wouldn't even know how to do that. So there's a problem. There's a big problem with that. We're not teaching the kids to think. And the new math, the Common Core system, is bad and stupid. Deborah mentions this. And Deborah Overhill, thank you for being here, Deborah. And I agree with it. Common Core is the worst thing out there. But it's an example of what I'm talking about. And notice how all these things are all connected. We have politicians who are very popular, who are being promoted on TV, that are saying, hey, socialism is a great idea. It does everything wonderful. And everyone's going to have a job, and everyone's going to get paid a living wage, and everyone's going to have health care, and it's going to be fantastic, and it's all free. That is the message that's being put out there very enthusiastically by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Senator Bernie Sanders, and many others. And that's the sales pitch. And it sounds good. Because it does sound good. There's no question. I'm not going to deny. That sounds fantastic. I'd like that if I didn't think about it and say, okay, and what are the immediate absolute consequences and requirements of these things? Because I'm not an idiot. I was taught, not with Common Core math, I wasn't taught to have rote memorization, but to have critical thinking. And I've lived a life where I've needed to be a critical thinker to keep myself alive. And so when I do these things, I suddenly go, well, there are many, many problems with it. There are many requirements on this that remove my freedom and make my life worse. And then there's also many absolute direct consequences of this that do not help my life and make my life a whole lot worse. So what am I going to do about these things? That's what critical thinking does, which is why we don't have critical thinking in schools anymore, because you couldn't get away with this if someone had critical thinking, didn't have, Common Core math, Common Core English, and actually had the way that I got raised. And by the way, I'm 50, so you're going back 45 years, 40 years going back in time. You take that knowledge, it doesn't work. So, and that brings us to, so you can't make these kind of enthusiastic statements that Ocasio-Cortez and Sanders are making without having a youth that have no idea what you're talking about. You also have a very different idea that where higher education is going, they've now taken on a more sympathetic viewpoint of socialism that hasn't been there. And why? Because the people, if we're being honest, almost everybody who was alive during World War I and during World War II, who had to have the main experience with socialism as it grew and the Soviet Union as it took over and it tried to expand. Most of the people who were alive during the 50s and the Korean War and the Vietnam War's beginnings, they're almost all dead. So people who have direct knowledge and have actively fought against socialism and its consequences, its immediate consequences, its long-term consequences, most of those individuals have died. And because most of them have died, we don't have people to tell the youngest generations, and even a few generations beyond that, to tell them, well, you're wrong. You're wrong because, either they escaped. I knew a gentleman when I was growing up, a great mentor of mine, Mr. Lester Kiss. He's from Hungary. Great man, hard-working, worked over at GM all his life. Fantastic worker, hard worker. And he understood what it was. He left. He was in Hungary. And he had to run to the United States to stay alive because of what would have happened if he had stayed there. And this is right after World War II. So this is roughly in the 50s, and we saw that swell of socialism. And his life would never have been as good or as free if he had stayed in Hungary. He may not have even lived if he had stayed in Hungary rather than coming into the United States. And God bless Lester, he's passed on. And the sad thing is, because Lester has passed on, he's not able to have the conversations that he had with me about his homeland that he loved dearly. We had family and friends that he left to come to America to have a far, far better life, and they didn't. And he knows that because he lived here and was able to communicate with them there. You know, he's not alive now to have that conversation with, say, my nephew, who happens to be 20, or some of my younger nephews and nieces that are, in their teens, or, if my youngest sister were to have a kid, then that would be, another generation. So there's about 3 generations of kids, potentially, that Lester could be talking to, explaining these things to. Oh, sorry, folks. There's a short there. Trying to get rid of it. There's 3 generations there that he could be talking to, and he's not alive. That's why they can get away with talking about socialism the way they do. And that's kind of sad. It really is. And I really miss Lester. He was a great person. Hang on one moment, folks. I hear some feedback. I'm going to try and get rid of that, but I don't want to do it in your ears. So bear with me 1 second. Yeah, that's much better. I hope that answers part of, or addresses at least part of, what you were talking about there. Now, and I see a question from Robin about Molinaro, and I'm going to go over there and I'm going to address that in 1 second. But I want to make sure I didn't miss anyone, because I know John Becker had a question, and I was on a little bit of a run, so I want to make sure I did answer that, because you guys are what makes this work, and I want to make sure I am answering your questions. So John had mentioned that, Michael, that's because schools today have become indoctrination centers, not education centers, and overall I believe with that. And John also mentioned that by the communist handbook, control the youth, you control the future. Well, that's not just communists. You heard that with the Nazis. You've heard that with every organization that's looking to grow and take over. It is a well understood and well received fact that if you have a good hold of the youth, well, yeah, you've got the future. The children are the future, no matter what viewpoint you may have. If you've got enough of the youth with you today, you're invariably going to have control tomorrow. That always happens. So I agree with that. I did mention Deborah Oberfield mentioned the new math system about Common Core, which is absolutely a disaster, which is exactly what Robin Scoville Clark mentions, that Common Core is a disaster. Absolutely in agreement there. And that brings me to Robin's question about Mark Molinaro, or her statement. She mentions that Molinaro says he's getting rid of Common Core if he is elected. And I have problems with Mark Molinaro. Now, as everyone may be aware, I'm a Republican. No doubt. I'm a conservative Republican, have been for quite some time. I've run for office. I speak about those issues on a regular basis. And so at the same time, I have problems with candidates. Some candidates, it doesn't matter what party they're in. I don't like when candidates do certain things. I don't like when the party does certain things. I'll give you an example. I don't agree with the local Broome County GOP. I disagree with the leadership when they decided to get involved in a race, the Broome County Sheriff race, and that they made a selection for the citizens by having Jason Ellis ejected from the race. That's not their job. I disagree with that. I don't agree with Mr. Mark Molinaro. I don't agree with him on the Second Amendment. And that being a cornerstone of things makes everything else far, far more important. I don't like his answers about the Second Amendment. I don't like his choice of lieutenant governor. It does not inspire me to believe that he's going to be a strong advocate of the Second Amendment. And if you're not a strong advocate of the Second Amendment, I have true doubt that you're a strong advocate of any of the Republican ideals. That's just my point of view. And he has yet to speak out actively to make me think otherwise. I got to be honest. I haven't been. I've reached out, and I've said it publicly before that I've reached out to Mark Molinaro to be able to ask him questions. I mean, I ask questions of everyone. I've asked questions of Larry Larry Sharp, who's the Libertarian. I've asked questions of Governor Cuomo, but everyone knows you're not going to get an answer there. I asked questions of Cynthia Nixon. She's never going to respond because she doesn't even come out to upstate New York, let alone answer the questions of people in upstate New York. I've asked Mark Molinaro for quite some time, since March. About March, I've asked for him to speak with me. I have yet to hear anything. So when he says that he's going to stand for something or against something, I have doubts. And I have no reason to believe otherwise. Is he a Republican? Fantastic. I do not vote for people blindly, and I need a reason. And right now, one of the biggest issues that I'm an advocate for is the Second Amendment, and I have doubts that he would support it. And until he can convince me otherwise, he's got a long way to go. But I'm willing to listen. But that's my honest opinion. Now, the fact that he says he's going to get rid of Common Core, I don't doubt that he would. And I hope that he can, and he does. But I don't have great confidence in him at the moment. He needs to give me something else to give me confidence. And that's my honest opinion. Not everyone will agree. Not everyone will like it. And that's okay. That's why we're here to talk. We're here to discuss. Maybe Mark Molinaro will hear this. You jump on and he'll give me an answer. And I would love to see that. I hope he does. I want him to do that. That is one of the reasons why I go and speak out. I want the politicians I'm talking about to come over and address what I'm talking about. Because I guarantee you, if I'm being the loudmouth and speaking about this, there are at least 10,000 other people in America that are also having the same ideas and same thoughts, if not more. In fact, I think the number is estimated that for every person that makes a comment, there's at least 1,000 other people who wanted to make that same comment, but didn't because they were afraid of being ostracized or being, standing out from the crowd and any negative consequence that may come of it, which almost never does. And for someone to do what I do, which is to be out there very publicly saying, this is what I believe and what I don't believe and what I think is right and what I think is wrong with any particular policy or ideal or ideology, it's like 1 in 10,000 people want to do that because you're going to get attacked. And people are going to say, oh my goodness, how could you say that? And you'll get labeled things like I get labeled Uncle Tom. I get labeled a racist, a sexist, an ageist. I think there's just about every ism that they have out there I've been called at least once. Because I say I don't agree. And that I think there are flaws, significant flaws in the things that are being offered. Because I'm having critical thought. So, that's why I do this. To get people, to have that voice out there. To let people know you can ask these questions. And to be able to get answers to those questions. Because that's very important. Now that I've ranted a little bit, let me also go to Deborah Overfield. She mentioned that the behaviors that come to school is crazy, bad, and it takes time to work with that to educate. Behavior problems have risen very high. Okay, I want to read that again, just to make sure I read it right. Deborah Overfield says the behaviors that come to school is crazy, bad, and it takes time to work with that to educate. Behavior problems have risen very high. Well, yes, because you're looking to not teach critical thought, where people aren't being independent thought, and we're social creatures. We like to have thoughts. We like to interact. If you're just shutting that all down to be robots, people are going to naturally resist that. And so to say that, for me to hear that kids are having problems in schools, and they're fighting against that, and they're having behavior problems, because they don't want to be just rote robots and they want to express themselves individually, I'm not surprised. So I thank you for that, Deborah. And I'm not surprised to hear that. Now, I have a question, another statement from John Becker. The answer to this country's problems are not in candidate. Our problem can only be solved by turning back to the Lord Jesus Christ and the Bible and live by it, and total obedience to God and his word. I will tell you, John, and John goes on to say, when prayer, the Bible, and Jesus were taken out of schools back in 1962, that's when we started going downhill at a rapid pace as a nation. Let me answer this. John, I understand the viewpoint. I understand having a very strong religious base, and that's a great thing. I will never tell you you're wrong about having your religious beliefs. I'm not a religious person. I'm not an atheist, but I'm not a religious person. That's my personal choice. Everyone has their own personal opinion about religion and where they stand with it, and I respect that. I understand your statement, and there is a demonstrable notice or documentation to show how there's been a lot of breakdowns and the loss of religion, not just Christianity, but Judaism, many of the religions in the world, that with that breakdown in our school systems and in our society, as it's become more difficult, and it has, to be religious today is a lot more difficult than it was in the 1970s. And it foreseeably will be even more difficult to be a religious personality, a person, in another 10, 20 years. So I understand that provides a certain structure, a certain stability for some individuals. It's a matter of faith, and if you have that faith, that you have that security, that inner confidence, and that's a good thing. I'm happy to hear that. I'll never tell you that that's wrong because I can't. That is a wonderful personal decision, and I do see that there is that difference. It is documented. Is that the answer? For some people, I agree with you, John. For some people, that is absolutely an answer. That we should have more of the religious schools available, so that students are able to get that background and to make that choice. Okay. But there are those who don't. And if we're saying that about one religion, Christianity, we have to say that about Judaism. We should say that about Islam. We should say that about a lot of religions, because in their views, they have the same answers. And we can't pick religions. I don't think that would be the right thing to do, especially in a nation that was built to allow for religious freedom. Overall, I would say we have really gotten far afield from that original thought that this nation is a nation of religious freedom. Because right now, virtually every religion is not free in America. Right now, every religion in America is pretty much beat up, and they're pushed aside. And people are told not to be religious, and they're encouraged not to be religious, rather than being able to make their choice on whether they want to be religious or not. We've seen it constantly on TV, in movies, social media, and in law, to try and isolate not just the separation of church and state, because that's fine, that's in government, that's part of our laws and our system, but to alienate religion in its entirety. We're seeing a lot more of that. And that's a bit troubling. It's kind of like the separation of, we have less marriages now. We have fewer people getting married, fewer people staying married than we ever did at any other time. I mean, it's horrendous. And so we have broken families, if we have families at all. And that has not been positive for our kids. But tie that into the fact that kids are being taught that socialism is a great idea, to be part of a collective is a great idea, to not have critical thought is a great idea, and that to do things because someone said so is a great idea, along with the fact that there's no family, no solid core family there to supplant that and say, no, that you do need to be critically thinking. You do need other examples and other experiences, and you need to have a moral base based around that family and that family's ideals than what someone's telling you from a book from 50 years ago. I mean, it's all connected. It's all connected. And I don't mean that in a conspiracy theory kind of way. I mean that in realistically, these things are all connected. We are social beings. Any aspect of our society, any aspect of our culture has an influence on us to some degree and those around us. We're social beings. So it's all connected to us. We don't just suddenly jump from point A to point Z and then over to point K. It doesn't work that way. That's not how we are. It's all connected. We do things because the consequences of our actions are leading us to a certain place. So when you're mentioning about religion, does it have a place in this? Absolutely. What that place is exactly, I don't know. And I don't know what the greatest benefit would be for individuals, because I'm honestly not a religious person, but that's not required. There's no requirement that we must be religious. And I'm not foolish enough to say that people can't do this or shouldn't do this, because that's not true either. People should have freedom, and they should be able to make that choice for themselves and say, hey, this is something I need, and I'm all for that. Hopefully that answers or addresses part of the concern of what you're getting across, John. And I know possibly it angers, well, then again, everything I say pisses off somebody. I heard that after I got off, after highlighting the shortcomings of one of the Broome County candidates who was running for sheriff and isn't Sheriff Dave Harder. No, let me just say Matt Bryan. Once he lost his mind, as he usually does, when someone is questioning him, sounds like someone I was told by the rumor. Well, no, that's a rumor. I won't even tell people. Then because I don't go there. I don't like talking about things that aren't firsthand. I have a great source, but I don't know the exact details, and I don't want to say something that's not 100%. So I won't go there because that's called, self-control. Think about it, Matt. But I won't get into that. But, and by Matt, I mean Matt Ryan, the candidate for Broome County Sheriff, who I think he's not qualified. He's not qualified, or is he a good choice? That's my personal opinion. You don't have to agree with it. That's just what I believe, based on the evidence, my experience, and what he's provided as a justification. He's just not a good choice. But let's see, we've got about 15 minutes left, and then the program's done, and I enjoyed this. It's very active, lots of conversations here, and folks, I love it when we're able to talk like this. I love that we're able to have these kind of conversations on so many issues. Tell me, what else are you thinking, guys? What else is on your mind, other thoughts that you may have? You know what? I've mentioned that I wanted to talk about President Trump and the fact that he's going to be coming out to Utica to help with the campaign for Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. And I know everyone's heard about that. That's been in the news. It's going to be an interesting event, I'm sure. And a lot of people I heard have had some question about, well, it's oh my God, it's so expensive. It's a fundraiser. It is a fundraiser with the President of the United States. It is exactly what President Bill Clinton, President Barack Obama, and every president since, I don't know, the 1900s have done. This is nothing new, that it costs money for a fundraiser to see the guest speaker, a special and exclusive guest speaker, in this case being the President of the United States, the leader of the world. Yeah, it costs more than average. And this isn't a rally like he was just in Pennsylvania having a rally. He may be back in the Southern Tier later this year to be able to have a rally. So that's for everyone. That's the rally. And that's for everyone in the public. But this is a fundraiser. So to say that, they're going to charge money, and they're going to charge a lot of money to be able to go to this event, that's normal. And, I love the shock and awe that people go, oh my God, it's so expensive. No, it's not. It's exactly in line, actually cheaper than many of the events held by many of the other candidates. Hell, I've seen more expensive fundraisers for members of Congress than what the president is charging. Yes, I have. And that's for Democrats and Republicans. I've seen state dinners, and I've recorded state dinners that I've been there as a member of the press covering. I've been at events across the country and across the state where more expensive events have gone on with 5,000 per person plates and up. Sure, that's not expensive. That's common in politics. So for people to go, oh my God, it's so horrible. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's just emotion talking. That's just hype because it's absolutely normal and it happens all the time. And if you were to look up any of the announcements for many, Nancy Pelosi, for Bill Clinton, for President Barack Obama, you're looking at that. I mean, how many times has Hillary Clinton been paid $250,000 just to give a speech? To give a speech at a school? $500,000 to Bill Clinton? And those are speeches. What's the difference? You're going out to be able to go to a dinner and you're paying per person about the same as it would be to have Bill Clinton to come out to Binghamton University or Barack Obama to come out to Binghamton University. It's the same thing. So there's no difference there. So that doesn't throw me off. Now, do I have the discretionary cash to be able to go out there and do this? No, I do not. Would I have gone? Absolutely. So that's not me. And I understand this is an economically depressed region. But you know what? The president coming out here to come out into Pennsylvania is bringing attention to this region and gives us an opportunity to be able to go out there and, when the attention's on us, shine and give people a reason to come here, which is very difficult considering that New York State's, 49th or 50th in business friendliness. We have one of the highest, I think we're the second or third highest taxes in the nation for businesses. We have a governor who is increasing our taxes on a regular basis. And we have an assembly, a state assembly that is pushing his agenda. Under 8 years that Governor Cuomo has been in office, and I understand he may be leading in the polls, but let's really think about what he's doing here. Governor Cuomo has increased taxes and tried to be more oppressive with his laws like the New York State Act, and he's now the red flag legislation he's trying to put through, that he has driven out 1.2 million people from New York. And tens of thousands of businesses have gone with those people. Okay, he's made the situation worse. Economically, we are in a worse position because we have fewer people paying taxes, fewer people who are capable of paying the higher taxes. They've all gone and left us because of Governor Cuomo and his policies, which were approved by the New York State Assembly. And let's be real. The Assembly has been controlled by Democrats since 1972. Okay, 40 years plus. And when we say that, well, Governor Cuomo's policies are horrible, we also are saying that the New York State Assembly policies have been horrible, that they have been driving out people from out of New York State. So I do hold all of the State Assembly, all of the members of the State Assembly accountable for this. And I understand there's Republicans in there. There's about 40 of them. And you know what? They can't pass anything. There's 108 Democrats. And I'm not picking on them because they're Democrats, but I'm picking on them right now because they're the majority. They are pushing this agenda, and the agenda is not working. It has not worked for 8 years. And in fact, the comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, has already come out and said, which didn't get a lot of press, surprisingly, that in 3 years, New York State will have $18 billion in debt. We're basically going to double our debt load. So basically, Governor Cuomo is doing somewhat what President Obama did, in that he's doubling our debt, which is unsustainable. For a state, it's unsustainable, especially when we're losing population, when we're losing our business owners, our wealth. We keep going to this well and saying, well, we'll just raise property taxes. We're going to charge the rich more. And the rich are doing the only thing that's logical in this situation. They're leaving. Then who's left to charge? The middle class? Well, the middle class are there because they have jobs to work at or to try and create and develop. But if the burden is so high that they can't create a new business because the taxes are too high, and this is unbusiness friendly, we have so many regulations and taxes that it's not friendly to businesses, Why would they start a business here if they didn't then go 15 minutes across the border to Pennsylvania and have a far better chance of having a business run? Why would you do that? Doesn't make business sense for most businesses. So you leave, which puts the burden even more on those who remain in the middle class and those who remain of the wealth, and even the lower incomes are suddenly getting pressured because there's less and less available. And more is being demanded of them to be part of this redistribution, this giveaway. We want to give, we are under Governor Cuomo, we're going to be a sanctuary state. We have illegal aliens coming in and we're giving them things, even though they're breaking our law, that we're not giving to our other citizens. And we're making promises to our citizens that are just not possible to be kept up with. The minimum wage artificially being at $15 or $12.50 in upstate doesn't take into account that most businesses can't afford that. How are they paying for this? Well, the only way they can pay for it is they raise their prices and or get rid of their people. The two things that are going to be most, you can only raise it so high before your consumer base won't pay for the product and will just live without it. So the only other choice you have is get rid of your people. This is a cycle. And it's upsetting. It's very upsetting. So when I'm hearing people say, well, it's President Trump's fault. No. Or President Trump is hiding from the people. No. He's doing something that's not normal. No. That's not true. And our concern really shouldn't be on whether President Trump is here or not. I mean, we should be happy about that. That's something that's actually benefiting us by giving us a talking point that most places don't have. And this is giving us an opportunity to accelerate our state and differentiate ourselves from other areas by saying that he's willing to come here and he believes that it's that important and the opportunity is that good, that he came here because he knows that there are enough people who are willing to pay and are willing to have a change, that they're willing to go that far. That's a positive for us, and we should use that positive rather than saying, well, no, we should go the other way, make it dirt cheap and follow the system that's been failing all the way through. That just doesn't work. And I see Ed Hick has joined us. And Ed, I know, I hope you had a good day. I know you were walking around, and I apologize, and I'll talk to you later about my failure today. I apologize for that. A couple of reasons for it. Ed will understand what I'm talking about in terms of candidates and some politics. But we've got about 9 more minutes left. And so I've been talking about a lot of things. This text block is blocking your face. There it is. Oh, I didn't even think about that. I was thinking that. There we go. That's a lot better. Ed, you know what, Ed? No one else had mentioned that. I've been talking this whole time. I'm just assuming that just because the text block is in my way, I was thinking that everyone else could see right past it. But you know what? No one's mentioned that to me. If they did, I would have fixed it like I just did. And, we'd be able to have a conversation. Instead, everyone's been looking at the top of my head. Well, that's fantastic. And that's because I thought everyone could see me. Oh, well. Now I feel silly and embarrassed. Oh, well. What can you do about that, right? But thank you for mentioning that, Ed. Now that I feel completely silly and that I didn't even think of something so simple. But, that happens. Perhaps people are listening. By the way, if you missed anything in the program, if you came in late, I've been doing this normally on a Saturday. This is an hour and a half long. Started at 12 o'clock. You can go to not only see it on Facebook, if Facebook is allowing it to be seen, because we know how Facebook is with conservative or any kind of concept or discussion that isn't the liberal far left viewpoint. And they have done a lot to restrict my access and content. So if you have trouble, you can always go to the No Sound Bites Allowed podcast, where I will be having this printed out. The audio will be available, and then people will be able to listen to that. And anything you may have missed, you'll be able to catch up on in talking about what's going on with President Trump, the thoughts on Cuomo, God, we talked about so many things today. Just the entire country, socialism, and Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, taxes, Ben Shapiro, a lot of things. So if you missed any part of that, you can definitely check it out at the No Sound Bites Allowed podcast and be able to hear that. And I'll be happy to, and that's all free, and you'll be able to have access to that. But we've got about 6 minutes left. Please, let me ask you, what else can we talk about in these last 6 minutes that I haven't addressed or haven't gone into? We were talking about President Trump. We're talking about the economy here in New York State and Governor Cuomo and how he's literally in 3 years, according to his state controller, DiNapoli, is looking at increasing taxes to the state debt to $18 billion, which is just ridiculous. Actually, it did remind me of something. We recently just went to $21 million in debt, $21 trillion in debt for the nation, for the United States. And a lot of people are complaining, I notice. There have been some people who've brought it up very quietly, but they've kind of hinted at it, that this is an issue for them. And I have to say to them, when you're looking at the fact that we have 21 trillion, that's only because we doubled our debt in the last 8 years. Literally doubled it under one president. One president has had more debt than any other president ever in the history of the United States. And in fact, has a debt so high that if you added up everyone else before him, that it would equal exactly the debt that he created. And that's President Obama. And you can give lots of excuses and reasons for why you think that happened. And the fact is, though, you're the president. It's your watch. It's your thing. And so that's what he's going to have historically. Historically, he was the president that doubled the debt. That's a fact. To say that we're currently still increasing, well, the debt's been increasing for many, many presidents since the 1940s. So the question isn't so much, is our debt continuing to increase? It is a question of, how fast is it increasing? And do we have an opportunity to turn it around? And I believe that if we continue down the path we're going right now, the long-term answer is yes. We're improving our tax debt. We're improving our trade deals. We're improving the opportunity, both with taxes and with business creation, to grow and develop. So do I think that we're going to be able to take care of that? Yeah. I think you see it slow down. Will it stop? No. Because we can't balance the budget. And until we balance the budget, it's just not going to happen. But that's puts us on the path to that. You know, we really need to take a longer term view. So many people, so many of us are looking at politics and government as a short term 1 or 2 year process. And we're looking at our media promoting the idea of short term answers without any consideration for the long term impact of what's going to happen. And that's kind of what I'm talking about on August 20th, when I will be doing a presentation on the red flag laws and their consequences of this legislation. One of the consequences is if someone decides to enact this against you here in the and not only in just New York State, but in many states like Connecticut and Indiana, based on the research I've been doing, they're going to take away your kids too. There's something that no one talks about when they talk about this, that a direct consequence of this one law is that the next thing that happens, or at the same time, they take your kids away. And now you're fighting for not just the right to own a firearm, but you're fighting for the right to get your kids back into your home, to be able to have your kids with you. And that's a scary thought. But that's because people are looking at the short-term answer, especially with the red flag legislation, but we see this in other legislation as well, that the short-term answer of, hey, we're going to make everyone safer by taking your stuff. And by taking your stuff, we forgot to mention to you that the next direct, legally mandated domino that's going to fall is that we must take your kids too, by law. And there's nothing you can do about it. Because once the first domino falls, the second one has to fall. It has to. It is a requirement. It is a direct consequence of the first. And that's something that we got to look at. Because a lot of times we have a lot of these laws that one thing happens, and as a direct consequence of that, we must see the next thing happen. And it's absolutely obvious if we think about it. But most politics today are built on the idea of don't look at that, don't think about it. It's kind of sad. But when you speak with me on the 20th, if you come out to the Vestal Public Library, it's free. It'll be a comprehensive review of the red flag legislation, not just in New York State, but across the nation, and potentially the legislation that will be coming up for across the as a state legislation. We'll talk about it. We'll see what's going on there. And we can talk about the consequences, which I think are very important. And I look forward to it. But we've actually hit the hour and a half mark, which is fantastic. And I always love, when we're talking back and forth like this, when we're able to express our ideas and share our thoughts and try and make clarifications where we can, I think this goes wonderfully. I think it's fantastic. It's the reason why I do this. I learn so much, and I hope I help other people understand so many of the things that are going on, and to understand where our nation is and where it's going to, and as well as our state and our local community here. And so I hope everyone's enjoyed it and had a great time with this. I had a great time speaking with you all, and I look forward to talking to you all very soon. Please keep listening into the No Sound Bites Allowed podcast. Your support is what keeps it going, and I appreciate that. I look forward to everyone coming out on August 20th to hear me speak about the red flag legislation. Again, that's free. And spread the word to everyone. There is an event on Facebook. And until then, I want everyone to be well, and I'll talk to you again very, very soon.